Never before has the same pair of sailors won back-to-back Transat Jacques Vabre races. But it's happened in an IMOCA.
Winning one was hard enough. Winning it twice with you? That was a great moment.
It was the defining moment of the 16th edition of the Transat Jacques Vabre. After a week of waiting for major storms to pass, the Ocean 50s were the first class of boat to return to racing. In Lorient on Monday, the 6th of November, in a 20-knot sou'westerly, the trimarans set off on their race to Fort de France. With Pierre Quiroga and Ronan Troussard on Viabilis getting the best start. Ahead of the fleet were some pretty nasty conditions, so the aim was to exit the Gulf as quickly as possible and avoid an oncoming low-pressure system. The trimarans would then have to round a mark off Cape Verde before crossing the Atlantic to Fort de France, a course of around 7,800 kilometres. The first evening saw Solidaire en peloton set the pace, as it did in the first leg from Le Havre. But Sébastien Rogue and Jean-Baptiste Gellet on Primonial were keeping up. The night brought the first casualty. Le Rire Médecin was sailing in 20 to 25 knots of northwesterly wind when it was dismasted. The crew was safely rescued a few hours later. Then, in the same stretch of ocean off the Galician coast, damage struck again, this time to Primonial. 4 meters of hull were ripped open, from the bow to the foil. Fortunately, the mast stayed up, and the crew were able to find their way to shelter in a Spanish port. Just a few hours later, the drama continued. When Erwan Leroux and Audrey Augeron discovered the pounding seas had caused their boat Coesio to delaminate. Their very safety was at stake, so the pair headed for land, but retired a few days later after realizing it couldn't be repaired. In one night, the Ocean 50 fleet had been halved. Gusts of 35 to 40 knots and crossed seas had taken out 3 serious contenders for victory.
Luc, Antoine, JB, Seb. It's really awful news, but guys, we are thinking of you. And we hope you feel better soon.
Having weathered the storm, things were looking brighter for Solidaire en peloton. For them, it was now about staying ahead of their remaining 2 rivals, Viabilis and Réalité, 2 boats who'd started more cautiously and allowed the blue trimaran to get away. Solidaire had a 70-mile lead and was heading for Cape Verde, passing Madeira and the Canaries on the way. Fabrice Kayak and Aymeric Chapelier on board Réalité found some strong breeze along the Moroccan coast and overtook Viabilis.
The good weather's coming. Finally, it's a real pleasure to glide along in this nice long swell, just the way we like it.
In moderate trade winds blowing at 16 to 18 knots, Solidaire en peloton was making 20 to 25 knots downwind and was quickly growing her lead to over 120 miles over the chasing pair. They passed Cape Verde on the night of the 11th of November. It marked the start of a long and glorious downwind leg in the trade winds. Speeding towards Fort de France, Thibaut Vauchel-Camus and Quentin Vlaming were loving it.
Pushing at an open door now. We're already feeling like we're there.
Winning was now out of reach for Fabrice Kayak and Aymeric Chapelier, but they were having a superb new Transat on this new boat and defended their second place perfectly all the way to the end. Ronan Troussert and Pierre Quiroga finished third, but were delighted with the support they'd received.
Ça va très très vite et du coup à l'intérieur ça secoue donc.
Can't sleep at the moment. Conditions out here really getting wild.
Voilà, les conditions sont incroyables, le trimaran.
This trimaran is just crazy in this weather.
Ça fait un peu peur quand même.
On the evening of November the 17th, in a tropical downpour and after 11 days and 11 hours at sea, Solidaire en Peloton crossed the line victorious, having covered over 5,000 miles at an average speed of almost 20 knots.
We feel it's a job well done, in good conditions, with a nice boat, a great partner.
Et puis, on va dire,
And all the cavalcade we've been chasing for all these years. At last, we've done it.
11 hours later, Fabrice Kayak and Aymeric Chapelier finished second, with Pierre Quiroga and Ronan Troussart completing the podium the day after. On the morning of the 7th of November, after 8 days stuck in Le Havre, the storm fronts finally passed and it was time to release the 40 18-metre IMOCA raceboats for their assault on the Transat Jacques Vabre. At last, they were heading to Martinique.
Yes, finally. It's almost time, at last. Here we go. Let's set off on this year's Transat Jacques Vabre.
Headwinds, sunshine, clear, deepening seas belied the tough weather forecast ahead. Exiting the English Channel would prove tricky. It was an impressive IMOCA fleet, the biggest in the race's history in fact, and with the modern foilers, one of the fastest too. Favourites amongst the new boats? For People, sailed by Thomas Rouillon and Morgan Legravier, looking for their second successive TJV victory. Charal, helmed by Jeremy Bayou and Frank Camas. Paprec Arkea, helmed by Johan Rischom and Jan Elias. And as expected, these boats made the early running. Behind them was a host of challengers aiming to exploit any opportunity, but with a busy calendar of races, all skippers were taking extra care not to wreck their boats. Amongst the IMOCA fleet were older non-foiling boats with keels. Here too the racing would be close amongst the experienced crews.
The good start, pretty lively. It was hot for sure. It'll be a case of tacking along the Breton coast and then a clear route to get to the south. Let's go for it.
After 36 violent hours in the English Channel and the Bay of Biscay with heavy seas and northwesterly, crews and boats were paying the price. 8 boats had either retired damaged or been forced to turn back for repairs. The remaining fleet had been spread out, with the leading pack maintaining a hellish pace.
It feels good when the wind calms down, even if we're still upwind, but the weather situation looks complicated ahead of us, to be honest. We don't necessarily have the solution with Momo at the moment, but we also have to look at what our little friends are doing.
Nos petits camarades, ils doivent être vers là. C'est-à-dire vers l'arrière du bateau.
Well, our little friends must be around here, the back of our boat, which is a good thing, but the real challenge is the weather situation's getting complicated. Some tough choices to make on the routes tonight, with the Azores to our right, the Canaries on the left. Got to work out the best way to Martinique.
It was a conundrum all the skippers had been facing for a number of days.
Just asking a few questions, because the weather situation is really not simple. There's a high-pressure system. That's going to be difficult to get through, so what we're thinking of doing is passing the little corner here before heading down through the Canaries. And then on south to Martinique. The alternative, well, it's much more involved, the northern option. It's based on the idea of sailing across and upwind until we meet with a very, very big low-pressure system, which is pretty nasty before it comes down here. The advantage of the northerly route is that it's shorter and it makes you really want to push hard. Now, the southern route is longer, but it's probably more practicable.
While the leaders procrastinated over which route to take, Teamwork and Groupe Dubreuil were the first foilers to decide on the more direct route. The leading keelboats, Monnoyeur and 5 Lantana, chose to follow suit. The newer boats chose to sacrifice distance for speed on a more southerly route. The leaderboard was constantly changing because of different tactics and strategies, wind shifts, and the influence of the nearby Canary Islands.
We're really happy with where we are.
Allez, ça déboule le long de...
Along the Canaries.
After a perfect start to the race, Charal lost a vital weapon.
We should be going faster, but unfortunately we don't have our main downwind sail anymore. Our masthead, which has been unusable for 2 or 3 days now. So we're handicapped in terms of speed.
Charal gradually lost power and lost ground on Paprec Archaea and for the people. Soon the chasing pack began to close in on her, including Initiative Kerr, Malizia, and For the Planet. On the more direct route, and over 1,500 kilometres to the north, Groupe Dubreuil was left behind after tearing her mainsail. Julien Villon and Justine Metro were now alone at the front, battling upwind through 3 successive lows. Despite the uncomfortable ride, they were thrilled because the data showed they'd chosen a winning route. For 4 days, Teamwork sat at the top of the leaderboard, but crossing the Atlantic is a long journey.
Never again. Never again will you let me do the weather. We're in low pressure area 3, and in 4 hours we should be able to turn south.
4 heures à peu près, on va pouvoir virer et partir vers le sud.
Meanwhile, on the same route but further behind, the leading keelboat saw Benjamin Ferret and Pierre Leroy engaged in a great duel with Louis Duc and Remy Aubrin. To the south, in unstable trade winds and aboard the 2 newest boats of the fleet, there was a great battle going on between the pairings of Brichom Elias and Rouillon Le Gravier. This was quality racing, and the sailors had to draw on their reserves to keep up an average speed of over 20 knots, despite the moderate winds. Behind them, Charal was overtaken by Sam Goodchild and Antoine Koch aboard For the Planet, who came back like bullets for the final sprint to the finish. In the chasing group were Initiative Coeur and Malizia, who were battling it out with L'Occitane en Provence and VMB Montbana Mayenne. In the trade winds, the crews pushed and pushed. Boats crossed, and one jibe followed another as they made the most of every wind shift. Thomas Rouillon and Morgan Le Gravier showed impressive consistency, not just holding the lead, but growing it too. It was becoming clear that those who'd chosen the more northern route were dropping behind. A zone of calm and a faulty mainsail attachment forced teamwork to lose several hours of repairs. Their hopes of victory were slipping away. Meanwhile, everybody was waiting to see what would happen when the leading boats crossed off Martinique. Could Justine Metreau and Julien Villon snatch a top 10 finish? On the 19th of November, Thomas Rouillon and Morgan Le Gravier won the Transat Jacques Vabre in the IMOCA category. After 11 days at sea, they'd covered 5,425 miles at an average speed of 19 knots.
Voilà. C'était pas simple de la gagner une fois.
It wasn't easy to win it once and then to win a second time with you.
Voilà.
Well, it was another great moment.
Super moment. Et y a pas de.
I couldn't have had a better companion.
Pour m'accompagner.
These are complex boats, a lot of levers, a lot of things to work on. And I think Morgan is the ideal person to do that, as well as being a great buddy.
In the early hours of the morning, Paprec Arkea crossed the finish line 4 hours behind the winner, but only 10 minutes ahead of third-placed Briton Sam Goodchild and Frenchman Antoine Koch, who actually designed the two boats that beat them. Only 17 minutes separated Chiral and Initiative Coeur after a final sprint from Devil's Rock. And in the end, Justine Metreau and Julien Villon came in sixth, following a dramatic finish that saw them finish just 1 minute ahead of Malizia. Teamwork finished 11 hours behind 4 people. Benjamin Ferret and Pierre Leroy finished 13th as the leading keelboat. After a week's wait, on Monday the 6th of November, the 12-metre Class 40 boats set off from Lorient. The first leg of the race was dominated by La Grande Pirelli, sailed by Italian Ambrogio Beccaria and Nicolas Andrieu, with Group Snef just behind, sailed by Xavier Macaire and Pierre Leboucher. Boats that were damaged and failed to finish the first leg between Le Havre and Lorient were permitted to start, but with a hefty time penalty, as in the case of Crédit Mutuel and Sogestran. Off the start line, the race was intense from the start. 3,500 miles still lie ahead, the island of Porto Santo in Madeira to starboard. 18 to 20 days of racing await before arriving in the capital of Martinique, Fort-de-France. Before that, the fleet faced 48 hours of headwinds to exit the Bay of Biscay. 2 tough days with 2 low-pressure fronts that battered the sailors, but a leading group did eventually emerge.
It was pretty wild. We're happy with our position behind the inevitable Italian. He's moving quickly. He's not that far ahead, though. He's on the attack. Heading for Cape Finisterre. We're on the way to Cape Finisterre, which we hope to pass this evening, and then we're going to study that weather because it is complex.
The fleet soon stretched out, with around 20 boats breaking away and choosing to skirt the Spanish coast for protection from the heavy seas. The pack raced on, looking for the best route south.
We've been shaken up right from the start. Clearly, we've had a couple of hellish nights. We're trying to catch the wind at the same time as the front runners. It's hard out there, but I think the fleet is likely to stretch. We're just trying to hang on.
Off Gibraltar, during a lull in the weather, the leader had some time to recover after the intense race start.
We're in the doldrums, but we're happy enough because we're starting to live and eat again, so that's good news.
The fleet stretched along the Portuguese coast and had a moment's respite from the storms. The women from the Cap Pourel project aboard Angie DFDS Brittany ferries were strongly placed in the chasing pack. Also there, Google Chrome, the boat crewed by professional skipper Kieran Leborgne and Basil Buisson, selected for having won the race's e-sailing game. Meanwhile, rookies from Martinique, Jean-Yves Aglet and Hervé Jean-Marie, aboard their boat Chalien, were moving up through the fleet. The cream continued to rise at the front as the fleet made its way to Madeira. Few could keep up the pace set by the Italians on Ibsa and Allegrande Pirelli. It proved a long way south before they found the trade winds between the Canaries and Cape Verde to speed them across the Atlantic. Whilst the weather situation had the sailors perplexed.
We decided on the northern route, which is more reliable, at least initially. You mean the southern route? Yeah, sorry, the southern route. But maybe we'll end up in the north in 3 to 4 days. It's really not easy to choose. I'm very happy our little friends are coming with us. Yeah, it's clear we've got our buddies behind us, but it's reassuring, really, to see we're all picking the same option. We're not just alone in our little corner.
The race south became more complicated as the weather data came in. It was time to choose between a northerly or southerly route to go round a windless high-pressure zone. The fleet was split. The group that chose north and included groups Snef, Amaris and Crédit Mutuel were able to take advantage of strong winds generated by the lows and began to break away.
We headed north with our Figaro friends, with Xavier and Pierre from Snef and Crédit Mutuel. We're well surrounded. We hope that could pay off in just over a week's time in Martinique. Was the north a good choice or not? I think we're better in the north, for now, but we'll see. Anyway, it was too hot in the south. There's no need to use the fan here. We're continuing south. We're on the road due south at the moment. We saw that some of our friends had gone a bit further north. So I guess we keep our fingers crossed.
Well, up north, the wind picked up, as did the sea, and soon the boats were banging off waves as they accelerated away. The leader of the group, Amaris, paid the price.
I had a nasty accident. The strong winds just sent me sliding across the boat, just went crash. Akil found me, unconscious at the front of the boat. So, yeah, pretty scary for a while there. I'm very happy to be with you at the helm, enjoying the sunshine, and being able to tell you about what went on. No real lasting harm done.
Just 24 hours in his bunk, and it was race on again for Amaris. We were in for a final twist as the finish into Martinique proved difficult. A large windless zone forming to the east of the island was proving difficult to avoid. Crédit Mutuel chose to round it to the north.
It's really heavy out there now. We wanted wind and we got it.
Group Snef chose to go straight through the windless zone.
We've just passed 10 knots of boat speed. So that hasn't happened for 3 days now.
And Allegrande went south on the trades. In the end, It was Alegrande that came out on top, and Brojo Becaria's and Nicolas Andrieu's boat handling and speed proved too much for the rest. They won the Transat Jacques Vabre in the Class 40 in 18 days and 12 hours. After his second place in last year's Route to Rome, Beccaria can now claim to be a class leader.
We've had a feeling for several hours now that we were more or less going to win it, but we outright banned ourselves from saying so out loud. And now, well, it's a huge weight that's been lifted. It's a beautiful moment.
Crédit Mutuel finished second, but the 22-hour penalty from the first leg denied them a podium finish. Instead, Amoris, sailed by Gildas Mahé and Akil Nabou, still shocked by their earlier accident, cut the line third, 8 hours behind the winner to claim second place overall. Alberto Bona and Pablo Santurde completed the podium 9 hours behind the winner. The 16th edition of the Transat Jacques Vabre proved to be a vintage one. 4 classes and 4 quality races. See you in 2025.